Not your average tabletop. Woohoo!
Welcome to Not Your Average Tabletop. I'm Zach.
And I'm Pepper.
And today we're going to be giving our first impressions of Destinies, which I think is another game we got on the Game Nerds Day.
Yes, Nerds Day. This was
From
another
Game
one.
Nerds. Yes. Yeah. So, like Jesse said, keep your eye out. These are all over the place.
Yes, go collect them all.
These videos, who knows when they'll come out. But we've got an unboxing video of this if you want to see some of the things we talk about, so you can check that one out. It should be released around the same time as this one, so if you want to see a closer look at what we may bring up, definitely look at that. I don't know. There's a lot of small miniatures in this game. I can't remember exactly what we did for the video, but
there is one really big miniature.
That is true.
Check that out.
But yeah, anyway, Destinies was, I think, it was kind of one originally when I saw the box cover. I don't think I was as excited about it. I was just kind of not like I was like, oh, I don't want to ever play that, but just not like, oh, this one looks like a really exciting one to me. I get way more excited about kind of the beige, kind of Euro game looking game. I think it's a solid enough cover now that I looked at it, but I think just the first few times that I saw it, I was just kind of, I didn't know if it would be something that I'd be overly excited about. But then kind of heard a lot of people talk about it, heard some reviews come out, and people are really, really loving it, and I don't know that I hear too much. No, I'm sure there's people that probably don't like it, I'm sure, but didn't hear too much negative talk on it, so I was like, it's interesting. And then I found it even more interesting when I found out it was a 3-player, or 1 to 3 players. I'm like, that's really strange. It seemed really strange to me because most games kind of go 1 to 4 or 2 to 4 or something like that. So I was like, And I think for some reason that made me think it was cooperative for some reason. I don't know. And then the fact that it kind of has a story mode and app just kind of seems like a very cooperative thing.
Yeah.
It seems like that's the type of game it's going to be. But yeah, so it's a very kind of story-driven game with some Euro, I mean not really Euro, but mechanisms, cards, kind of management of your, I don't know what you'd call it exactly. But yeah, so I think after that I was definitely a little more excited about it, and kind of once saw it on a deal or whatever, I was like, it sounds like one that's a little more approachable than kind of some of them get kind of, I think, really in depth into the story, get long stories. Whereas this one sounds like it still had a bit of, I don't know, sometimes it seems like those may not have as much gameplay in them. Not always, but this one, it made it sound like it had some gameplay. So I was probably middle of the road excited for this one by the time we got it.
Yeah, I actually had almost gotten this one a ways back. I think back when I binged and backed quite a few games at once. This was one that I almost did, and I even watched, I think, the How to Play from Rodney Smith, and I was like, oh, this actually looks really cool with some of the mechanisms, and pretty approachable as well, and the app implementation looked pretty great, but I ended up not pulling the trigger. I didn't want to spend too much money. But yeah, so then when you did end up backing it, and I was like, oh, finally getting back to that, because it had been a while, like maybe a year or so. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I was quite interested in that, and so the excitement was probably a little higher than yours, because I'm definitely a little more into kind of, I guess, I don't know what you'd call it. It's not really a dungeon crawl, but I feel like I just kind of group all those. I was going to say cooperative, but it's, again, not a cooperative game.
Seventh continent where you're exploring, opening up a map. It's got that kind of thing to it. So that's kind of a dungeon crawly thing. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I think I'm a little more into that type, battling some monsters. As you can see, there's a big monster on there. But yeah, and also the kind of, it's from Lucky Duck, and they did Chronicles of Crime, and just really enjoy the way you can use those kind of QR codes and scan those, and maybe ask a certain someone about a specific object, and
Mhm.
maybe they'll tell you something different than someone else on the map that you can go and see. Just kind of, I've seen a little bit of that in this, had me excited.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I think at this point, just in case, we may bring up spoilers. We just played the first initial kind of introduction scenario.
Yep.
So note that as well. We haven't actually played. I think the rest of it's kind of all a story kind of that's combined for the other episodes. So we just kind of did a standalone one. But we may have some possible spoilers. So if you don't want any chance of that, I guess we can kind of just say now what our scores are if they don't want to. Jesse will have it in the thing, so you can skip ahead to that if you don't want to actually hear too much spoiler talk. And then we'll have to make sure not to tell any spoilers.
To right there for final thoughts.
But yeah, so we got into it, and we each had to pick a character out of 3 characters.
Yep. Which we had already picked our characters
we
just
thought
from
we
the
could
cards.
just pick.
So I was a little upset because the one that I wanted to play as wasn't even included in this scenario.
Right.
But yeah, so we each got to pick those. Kind of each one gets a starting setup and kind of 2 destinies. Like kind of 2 different paths that you can follow. So right off the bat, I think that adds some variability and replayability for the scenarios. Kind of, especially limiting it to just 3 characters and kind of probably the same story. I think every time you would play it, having those 2 options to possibly pursue, I think does add quite a bit, and I'm just very happy with that. Just the option to choose, and you can switch throughout the game as well. It's not like you have to choose one to pursue at the start of the game.
Yep.
So I found that nice as well, and just a little bit of story, and it's kind of nice to just keep that secret and hear little things pop up even on other people's turns that get mentioned, and you're like, oh, that makes sense for me, probably not for them, but that tells me something.
Yeah, I would agree. That was kind of fun having the little bit of story that you kind of before your options to kind of explain why you would do these 2 things. I found that little bit pretty interesting, and the fact that then you kind of are working throughout the game and you're kind of getting these little bits of story and kind of figuring out as you're going, like, oh, okay, now this is coming together. I think it was just very clever. I really like how the kind of when you start, you put out the kind of square pieces of land, and then they have kind of people or places you can go talk to, points of interest kind of, and then you're putting out everything around it, or 4 kind of unexplored areas around it, and then you can kind of go explore those areas and talk to new people. I think that works really smoothly. The app makes it very, very easy to know exactly what to pull and what to put where. I think that just works almost flawlessly.
For sure.
Otherwise, I think the game might be too much if you just had like a rule book that you're looking through, like, oh, now put this here, and now put this one here. I think that would just make it a little too...
I think so.
I like that, and just the bits of story as you're going throughout the game. And I guess I was not aware at the time that I'm assuming... I mean, we only played with 2 players and 2 stories. I think all these stories kind of intertwine by the end and come together, which I was not aware of at the beginning.
As it started, because I think you had a story piece, and you talked about a certain character, kind of what they were to you, and then that just was like a huge revelation for me and my story and kind of what I had been doing. Maybe related to that same character, kind of in our interaction, trying not to spoil too much here, but then I was just like, wow, like kind of mind blown kind of moment, and like, wait a minute, this is just like all intertwined, and it kind of like ended up pitting us against each other in the game, which is just really awesome, kind of, because in our game it kind of, we both ended up kind of fulfilling our destiny, like, at the same time, same turn. So we were just kind of going through the end game, trying to win at the same time. I just thought that was really cool. And
I did as well.
and it may not happen that way in every game, But in the
Yes.
first one, it did work out, and I think about perfectly.
Yes, it did feel almost perfect, and I'm hopeful that that wasn't just a fluke, because I was worried, and there was a point in the game where I even said it, and I was like, okay, I'm a little concerned as to what's going to happen here, and I may not actually know this or yet. I don't know if just based on how it played out, I don't know exactly how this would work in the future. Um, but I was wondering whether or not I would get to fulfill mine if you kind of completed the game before me. So I was worried that I wouldn't even get to kind of see, this whole game I've been building up to this final, kind of trying to fulfill my destiny, and I may not even get to experience it, which at least I guess you could play through it again.
Yeah. But still,
it's a little disappointing if you've played through, and this one's not a short game.
No.
I think it's going to be at least
even
probably
for the
a 2-hour
introductory
session.
scenario was like much longer than I would have thought.
Right. That's why I was like, oh, this is actually quite a bit of time. I mean, it's good because it's a story-driven thing, and I think it kept me engaged the whole time. But yeah, I was just going to be a little kind of disappointed if I didn't get to do any of it. And I don't know if that's how the game works or not. But that's what I was thinking at one point in the game, because I was like, because you had kind of started to fulfill yours, and I was just like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to even start mine, or if I don't know how if the app forces it so that. I don't know exactly how it works. But yeah, I thought in our game it worked perfectly.
Yeah, because I had kind of gotten through the first few stages, so like, you complete your main objective destiny, and then you kind of go through a few rounds, not normal rounds, but just trying to do kind of
past tests
to finish your destiny. And I had kind of gotten through a few rounds of mine, and then you were able to get finish yours after that. And so it felt nice that I was able to do some, because after you did do that, you did win the game. When you finished yours. So I was like, dang it, because I felt like I was probably at about the end of mine, and I just didn't pass the test, didn't get a good roll, and then that allowed you to do that, which you also rolled an equally bad final roll, so I'm not sure what that's up. You had a fantastic roll right before that, which
I did.
Could have definitely impacted it. I'm not sure what it factors in, but I just thought that whole thing was really cool, and I really love the kind of test system with the kind of 3 tracks at the bottom, 3 different colors, and you have little checkpoints along here, little tokens, and the wonderful dual-layered boards that throughout the game you can upgrade those by moving those little bits backwards
to the left.
To the left. And then when you roll dice, so if you're going on the green track, you roll the dice. You can kind of choose. You can possibly get extra dice to roll as well, and the sum of that on that track for every one of those little checkpoints, meeting it or before it, what you roll, those are successes.
Right. So yeah, if you rolled a 6 and you had a chip on the 2 and the 5 and the 6, you'd have 3 successes.
Yeah, and then some of the dice even have just a plain success side, which I think I rolled once, and you had an ability to manipulate those dice as well, so sometimes you actually are like, I could roll higher, but actually I'd rather just roll a straight-up success.
Right.
But yeah, I just found that whole thing very satisfying, especially near the end when you're getting those really low on that track.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I think that was one of the biggest pieces of the game, is managing those tracks and getting those down closer to the end, so that as the game goes on, you're kind of getting better and better and having more successes.
Yeah.
But I do find it interesting, too, because the game doesn't really let you know, like, you need 3 successes to do this. You need 5 successes to do this, or anything like that.
Like the rule book, like, about this many on average, which we didn't reference.
Right.
Ever.
We never did look at
for
that.
kind of difficulty, like, you probably want to get this many, but we just kind of went with it. And, it felt right most of the time with the outcome versus what we rolled.
I would agree.
Yeah.
You usually knew if it did not seem good. So I would agree that it felt like it was always the right outcome to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I think we ended up playing through the whole thing. We got through the whole area. yeah, I think my only possible negatives with this one would be, yeah, if there is something where you wouldn't complete your story at all, or that could be a possible negative. It can be a little long, but I think it works for the story, and I'm not 100% sure on replayability. Like, there's definitely things that you're not going to explore throughout the game, so you're going to have other things to explore, and like you said, the other Destinies, trying to work towards those, or the other characters that you may not have played with are going to have other outcomes as well. But overall, I don't know, like, once I play through one, if I'm going to want to play through it again.
That's true.
Maybe. I'm not 100% sure, but
Yeah.
I think those would be my only possible negatives to the game.
Just got to get the expansions.
That is true. They
More
do
and
have
more.
some expansions.
That's how they get you.
That is how they get you. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like Forgotten Waters, where you have kind of the scenarios that you go through.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So back from the spoilers, you are safe now.
which we didn't have too many spoilers. I
Not
don't
really,
think,
maybe
but-
just a little bits, but nothing too bad. So feel free to go back. It ain't bad. And spoil literally everything. But yeah, so our final ratings. I guess, what do you give this one?
I think I have to come in with a 9. I liked it quite a bit. I think, like, whether or not you watched the last little bit there, I think the only thing holding me back from it even higher probably is that the replayability. I'm not sure how much I'm going to want to go back and redo one that I've already done.
Yeah.
Not that I wouldn't ever do that, but I just don't know that I would for sure.
Yeah.
But I think, just based on that initial story, I think I'm really going to enjoy kind of going through a few more that kind of all connect. I think that'll be really interesting, really cool. Kind of gives me, like I said, a little bit of the vibes of kind of a Forgotten Waters, which is one that I really enjoy as well. So yeah, I would highly recommend looking into this one. I think it's usually decently cheap. From what I've seen, at least as of 2022. I don't know if that's changed. Late 2022. But yeah, and then I'd also say if you do like this one, I'd highly recommend looking into Forgotten Waters if you typically like to play with probably a group of at least 3, if not 4, or more possibly.
Yeah, so if you want this but have a larger player group,
Oh yeah, because it's only up to 3.
Definitely go with Forgotten Waters, I guess. What's the play length comparison, would you say, there? Forgotten Waters, you can do like half a scenario.
You can. I would say that one's...
I think Forgotten Waters is longer.
It is at least 2 times longer, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we only did the beginning scenario here. I don't know if the other ones are going to be longer or shorter or the same length. Probably about the same length, I would think, and that was about 2 or so hours, I would think.
Yeah.
And Forgotten Waters usually, at least from what we've played, I think comes in at probably 4, 5, 6 hours possibly. So it's a little bit longer, but
but yeah, final rating. I'm matching you here. I've got a 9 as well. Like we said, I don't know what was in the spoiler section, what wasn't in the spoiler section, but we've said it before. I just love...
And I'll say it again.
I'll say it again. Love the kind of dice checking, test passing system in the game and the upgrading, and just kind of the whole open world feel, and it just really feels like, more than any game I've played, that you're really interacting with the world and the characters in there, and kind of the characters' motives, and a little kind of trying to solve the mystery type of thing as well. That's kind of similar to Chronicles of Crime, but like it's not solve the mystery. The game. It's just a little bit here and there, and trying to figure out, okay, so I think this might be related to that, and it's got a lot of things that make you feel clever in this game. And yeah, I think the playtime is still long. I don't know if they're going to be longer with the other scenarios, or if it's still going to be the same length. I think, like Forgotten Waters, I think Forgotten Waters is longer, but not as in-depth. Not as much depth to it. This one is shorter, but more to think about. And yeah, I really love both. Although this one does not have the comedy of Forgotten Waters.
Yes, and that one has it all read out, whereas this one just
kind of the introduction read out, and then otherwise you do read it. So I think, I mean, I'm like, oh, I don't know which one I'd choose in the long run, even though I think my first impression of Forgotten Waters was like a 7 or something. So it's kind of weird, a 9 and a 7, to be like, oh, I don't know, but just they tackle kind of a very similar thing in very different ways. And I guess I don't have to choose. This isn't Forgotten Waters versus Destinies. It's just Destinies, and I really, really loved our first play.
I would agree. I'm definitely excited to go back and go through those other scenarios.
Yeah, just the way that it all comes together was just so satisfying.
It was. It really worked.
Haven't
solidly.
gotten that in any game.
And like you said, I would 100% agree that it felt like you were in the world and interacting with the different places and people there more than any game that I've played before.
Yeah.
So I found that really cool as well. So, yeah, those were our initial thoughts after one play of Destinies. Like we said, if you want to check out some of the components and things, check out our unboxing video, this one. But otherwise, we hope to see you there. And as always, don't forget to
Keep on nibbling
on our content.